to ask the Secretary General, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, to come forward and present the organizational report.
Amanda, awethu, bopha qabani.
Comrades, sicela abantu abasebenza kwi-accommodation subcommittee ne-catering subcommittee beze le ngemva kwestage. Abantu be-accommodation ne-catering siyanicela la ngemuva.
Amanda, awethu, Matla, Arona, Aina, Matemba, Asho, Manda. Thank you very much, Comrade President, Comrade Deputy President, Comrade National Chairperson, members of the NEC, invited guests, and most important, delegates to conference. Comrades, I stand here to present the report of the National Executive Committee for the period 2007-2012. You have got copies of the report. I'm not going to read it line by line. I'm presenting it. We are starting, comrade, by making an assertion that the ANC is much better, stronger, more united, and having more capacity to deal with contradiction it has to deal with. We're making that assertion because it is important for us to trace what was the state of the ANC when we came out of Polokwane. Because if you don't trace that state of the ANC when we came out of Polokwane, you will be tempted to be affected by the effects of recency. That the Free State took us to court, this, that. The fact that people want to take us to court is because they want to take over a good organization. We came out of the 53rd National Conference, comrade, divided, out of the 52nd National Conference. We came out of that conference divided, fragmented, and polarized. We were polarized into two poles, clearly divided. You will remember in that conference you would have even rallies during the conference reflecting the poles in the conference. We were faced with both internal and external challenges, but we were coming to this conference saying we came out of all those challenges intact and strong. What were these challenges, comrade? In brief, the NEC had to deal with the reality of charges being laid against the president of the ANC immediately after the 52nd National Conference. You will remember that there was even a threat that those charges were going to be delivered in the conference itself. So as we walked out of Polokwane, we had to confront difficult situations. We had to deal with the new experience of having the President of the Republic being not the President of the ANC. That is not much of the problem. The problem is that this President, having been contested out of office in the organization. That was new experience, the 1997 experience of a smooth handover from Mandela to Mbeki, couldn't inform how to deal with the new situation where there was a contest and the sitting president voted out of position and had to finish the term in government. We had to learn out of that situation. The unruly behavior that gained currency in the run-up to the 52nd National Conference first became a subculture in the organization. Many comrades started believing that that is the way of doing things in the ANC. We had to confront that. The rowdy conferences in the provinces and in the leagues immediately after the 52nd National Conference characterized that period. The recall of the President of the Republic was painful, but also a point of learning. We are saying it was a point of learning because here is a sitting president recalled. We had to move with the necessary speed to actually deal with a situation which was not normal, it was abnormal. So the mass resignation of ministers and deputy ministers marked the climax of the crisis, which had to be managed with precision and speed. And that is exactly what happened, because within hours of that mass resignation, we had to fill those vacancies with the necessary speed without a hiccup. The formation of COPE was the highest point of these divisions. I want to take conference back, comrade, to the declaration of the 52nd National Conference, which set out the mandate of this NEC that I'm presenting this report on behalf, when it said that the resolutions of the 52nd National Conference are, I quote, a mandate that will guide all actions of all the cadres of the ANC, wherever they may be deployed, and which will form the centerpiece of our policy agenda over the next 5 years and beyond. This national conference marks the end of that 5 years. Now, when assessing, therefore, the performance of the NEC, comrades must quantify the extent to which this mandate has been implemented. The report on the work of the subcommittees of the NEC gives delegates a complete report of the work done. Now, I will come back to the question of the subcommittees, but let's just look at the performance of the NEC. The NEC members were divided into subcommittees and deployed in provinces. This was done to enable the NEC to effectively execute its mandate and fulfill its constitutional duties. You are delegates, you are from provinces, you will have first-hand experience of whether the NEC members did the best in servicing the structures in the provinces. Because when we deploy teams of the NEC to provinces, we are not deploying meeting attenders. We're deploying teams of the National Executive Committee. We're deploying teams of the National Executive Committee which must help the structures in the province, in the region, and in the branches in grappling with complex situations on an ongoing basis. So when you are assessing us, assess us on whether we did fulfill that mandate. Now, what were the difficulties that we had in actually implementing the decisions? The first one, comrade, is that deployment to the provinces, there were instances where there was a sense that it was not taken seriously. That was the first thing. And on the other hand, there was also a counter problem to that of provinces resisting the presence of NEC deployees. When NEC deployees walk into a province, some provinces saw red immediately. And that created a contradiction. Now, that is the first one. The second one, comrade, is that NEC members did not attend subcommittee meetings as regular as they should have. This left the majority of the work in the subcommittee to invited members with weaker political guidance from the NEC members. Let me explain what that means. This means in every committee, we invited ministers, DGs, professionals in that particular scope of work to be part of those committees. And we say it cannot continue that the heavy burden of the work of subcommittees depend on those invited professionals and experts. The political guidance must be derived from the NEC deployees to those subcommittees. The NEC members, comrade, therefore, need to be monitored in that regard as we move forward. The relative unity of the ANC became less when the ANC was not under immediate threat or attack, and comrades began to take things for granted. At this point, comrade, is counterposed to the maximum unity that was evident when there was a splinter group that was forming COPE and the ANC felt under siege. All its cadres came to the fore to defend the movement. But once that threat disappeared, then you began to see comrades beginning to take unity for granted. NEC members are deployed in many other demanding areas, comrade, in governance and in diplomatic work, leaving too little time for organizational work. These are advantages as well in terms of benefiting from the experiences of these NEC members they gain in those deployments. But the organization on the other side is deprived of the skills while they're honoring these deployments. Other difficulty, comrade, which makes work of the NEC much difficult, were the public spats between ANC members on the one hand and between ANC members and alliance members, which is affecting the organization negatively. We're making this point, comrade, because when we go to the section on alliance, we are going to raise the impact of public posture taken by individual alliance partners and the impact of that public posture on the effectiveness in executing the work of the movement. Because I want to say now, and I will repeat when I come to that section, that if the ANC is attacked by an alliance partner, the impact of that attack is heavier on the movement than all the opposition parties put together. So that issue is quite important. ANC has been seriously compromised by ongoing leaking of internal and confidential documents and information. In many instances, it is not just leaking documents. You can have a sense as you read a Sunday paper that this journalist was not only given a document of the ANC, somebody sat with this journalist and took the journalist through. That compromises the movement heavily. Factionalism seems to have become institutionalized, and comrades have become more bolder in their factional activities. You will find factions even going to the extent of giving themselves names in the provinces. Let me use the Free State because it has already gone to court, where they will call themselves Regime Change and Ramkral. And it's known by everybody that there is regime change and Ramkral, and it looks normal. It is abnormal, it is not normal. We can't institutionalize factions in our movement. And therefore, factionalism has also led to virtual collapse of discipline in some of ANC structures. It is causing the collapse of discipline in the sense that when action has to be taken, tough decisions have to be taken, first of all, we'll have to look into which side that the affected member fall. And therefore, if it is my associate, I go steady. And I think, comrade, if we're not paying attention to this at all levels of the movement, we are going to bleed the movement to death ourselves. Now, the tendency of the ANC Youth League behaving in a manner that is similar to that of forces opposed to the ANC has costed the movement heavily over time. Because the ANC Youth League is a body of opinion within the ANC. Therefore, its work must complement and supplement the efforts of the movement. It can't be correct for the Youth League to preempt the ANC every move, even announcing sensitive pronouncement that the movement has to make, because in the public eye, it makes the ANC as either succumbing or tailing behind the ANC Youth League. We think that was one of the issues that actually impacted negatively on the ANC. Now, in the face of these challenges, the NEC spent a lot of time defending the organization in the public discourse and correcting distortions and misconceptions. And that's why the NEC subsequently took a decision that we must be more proactive with communication, because if all the time we are responding, we lose control of the issues that affect the ANC directly. And our submission, comrade, is that that strategy is beginning to give us the first signs of success. Now, the ANC, comrade, maintained unity even in the face of clear provocation by those who felt that they had lost the 52nd National Conference. You will remember, we came out of Pulukwana and committed ourselves that, listen, it's unity, 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 and unity. And we made a bold statement that there will be no purging of members of the ANC who had different preferences and all different views. And we had to apply that in practice to be seen to be walking the talk. But there were instances where when the ANC was trying so hard to pull people together, you could see that there is provocation here. People are just provoking you into doing something that is not in line with that. In those instances, decisive action had to be taken. We are citing the example of the recall of the Premier of the Eastern Cape at one point, because after several visits, it was clear that there was no plan, there was no vision, and there was no commitment into correcting the situation. The second situation, comrade, was factional battles in the Western Cape, which were just open and bleeding the organization badly, where we had to take serious actions, and we decided, comrade, to recall the Premier of the Western Cape. I must report to conference that the recommendation was that recall that Premier, both the Secretary and the Chairperson of the ANC must not stand for elections in the coming conference. But in taking the decision was that recall the Premier, you can't deprive ANC members right to stand and to elect and to be elected. The reality of that is that it created a perception that the intervention weakened one faction and strengthened the other. The cleaning of the provincial executive after that move and totally purging people who were seen to be having a particular thinking didn't help the situation. It reinforced the situation that this intervention strengthened one faction and totally killed the other. The impact of that decision is still with us today. When we go to the provinces, we'll briefly show you how that province, as we have seen two provincial conferences where one provincial conference was in two venues. And a situation where we had one provincial conference in one venue, but a section of the conference refused to participate. That is the impact of that decision, and we must go back and deal with that situation, comrade. The president of the ANC was recharged, comrade, almost immediately after the 52nd National Conference. The NEC decided to support the president practically, because there is something, comrade, where you say you are in solidarity, and we say we must have a stay away on Monday. You pay your solidarity by just putting a black armband. We said we can't continue that way. We support the president by just putting a black armband. We are going to be practical and take practical steps. That's why we put a number of teams to deal with various aspects of that case, including a legal team that is written much about by the media. And the reason was that we should support the president of the African National Congress, and we did so. Now, and that case, comrade, brought a number of situations for the ANC. First of all, it was dismissed, and the cabinet and the NPA appealed. That appeal raised the tension between the party and the government. And we had to deal with that situation. And the NEC at that point recalled the President of the Republic, which was a serious, painful decision which was felt throughout the organization and throughout the country. Our argument, comrade, is that yes, it was the recall that was triggered by the case, but it was not the main trigger of that decision. That decision of the court was a tipping point in the sense that it came at a point where there were two situations, where two centers of power was paralyzing the organization. Number two, it came at a situation where every time a decision is taken had to be negotiated when it goes to government. And they took longer, and therefore the organization became very flat-footed. And thirdly, it came in an environment and confirmed that where there were suspicions that the persecution of the president was political. And therefore, when the court made that pronouncement, it created complications for the African National Congress. Now, the resignation of the president was the most difficult period of the ANC, with several ministers and deputies and one premier resigning from the ANC, and some of the cabinet ministers who resigned led the breakaway that formed the COPE. And again, it reflected the highest point of these divisions and tensions. That's why, comrade, even in this conference, it is quite important never to elevate disagreement and having different preferences to enmity. Because once we elevate it to enmity, it means after every conference of the ANC, every 5 years, those who think that we have lost the conference will break away. Any boulder, when it has splinters, it is having less weight by the time it goes to the bottom. And the ANC is big, it's huge, but the splinters that break away from it reduce the weight of it as a movement. So that's why, comrade, now there are many things we disagree with as delegates. Talk to each other, understand one's point of view, persuade each other, but don't elevate that into those are enemies, and therefore when one talks, you howl him down, when another talks, you howl him down. Now, but this was a blessing in the sense that it mobilizes cadres of the movement. Let me deal a little bit with the case of that led to the charges of members of the ANC who were leaders of the Youth League, because that is another problem that we had to deal with. That started with the Youth League attacking the SGO with impunity. And when there was nothing serious happening, they graduated that attack to every leader of the ANC who dared talk when they were committing a mistake. Almost all the members who dared say, this is not right, it's not accepted, and they had to get an aloe out of that. But they ultimately graduated that into open attack on the president of the ANC. Now, that issue led to the charging of a member of the ANC called Julius Malema in 2010. And that case, comrade, was settled through a plea bargain. That case. It's important for conference to understand that, because if conference doesn't understand, many stories can be said. It was settled through a plea bargain because the assumption was that it would lead to more wisdom and people beginning to take a more cautious decision and action in dealing with the mother body. But that continued, comrade. There was a little bit of abating of the attack, but that continued. And what actually became a serious trend, which is always dangerous when electing, people almost pretend to be owning a candidate, is that there was this undertone that, listen, we delivered you into leadership, therefore you should follow what our thinking is. It can't be. It can't work in an organization, comrade. Leadership is elected. It's not a property of any delegates who vote for that leader. That leader is the leader of the African National Congress. That leader will be leader of the African Congress. This NEC is the NEC of the African National Congress. It is not part of it being a property of a certain grouping and part of it being a property of a certain grouping. It is the leadership of the ANC. And in this conference, we are going to elect leadership that leadership will be the leadership of the ANC for those who supported it and those who did not support it. Now, comrades would also try to collapse conferences by boycotting them, often misleading members of the ANC into thinking that less than 70% of branches attending conference, it means that conference cannot continue. That is misleading members of the ANC, comrade. 70% is the threshold to qualify to hold that conference. Once you qualify to hold that conference, delegates are allocated to branches proportionately, and the quorum of a conference is based on the majority of delegates, not of branches. Majority of delegates. Now, whether it is a group of comrades who sit in the city hall in Amatole, or a group which sit in a different hall in Ngagamdiri Mulema, or it is a group that boycotts a conference in Nelson Mandela Bay, if you think that by pulling few branches out, if there is a quorum, that conference will continue. Now, and the point that I want to emphasize, comrades, is that ANC members must always remember that it borders on counter-revolution to deliberately sabotage an ANC gathering and meeting. We have always found strength as this movement in our diversity of opinion and wide range of engagement. What makes the ANC live for 100 years is its ability to engage and appreciate that diversity of ideas make the movement take balanced decisions. This new tendency of thinking that when we disagree, we are enemies, it's a new tendency in the movement, and we must confront it. The rowdiness of conferences is now minimal. Actually, coming to this conference, we ran all the conferences except Gauteng and the Eastern Cape. There was not a single conference where there was a fight. Unlike in 2008, the Sun City Conference, bottles flying around, the Mangaung ANC Youth League Conference, many things happened there. And the Northern Cape Conference, you can list those conferences when you came out of Polokwane where there was physical fight. In the run-up to this conference, not a single provincial conference saw physical battles. Now, we must, however, register that in the nomination conferences, budging and invading a conference venue of the nomination conference in Limpopo cannot be justified. Cannot be justified. It doesn't matter how irritated you were, how agitated you were, you can't have a license to just disrupt a meeting of the ANC. So that cannot be justified. It cannot be justified as the situation we saw in the Northwest. I would imagine both those conferences are going to come here when we discuss credentials. I suspect so. I suspect so. They will come here and they will want us to believe that there was something extraordinary and remove our eyes from rowdiness and anarchy. Where you have two groups, one meeting in Mafikeng, one in Atebie Sport, and the NEC deployees, thank you to those deployees, had to say, We are inviting you out of those factional meetings to an ANC meeting in Rustenburg. And that's how the nomination conference was ran in the Northwest. And these issues, comrades, we must pay attention to them because we take them for granted, but when you see the underlying factors, you begin to see comrades feel so strong about one another that a comrade drives, he goes to a comrade's home, wait, angry all the time. When Comrade Chiga arrives, he's shot and killed. It's an ANC, it can't be accepted, it can't be explained, it can't be justified. Now, the slate-based elections continue to weaken the movement because when you elect on the basis of slates, good cadres of the movement fall through the cracks because they happen to be in a wrong slate. The fight against slate politics must be won, comrade, because slates weaken the movement. I can share with you the experience that we had when we talk about this as officials. They say, yeah, you were a product of a slate in Pulugwana. Now, because you are a beneficiary, it must pay. No. That is not the issue. The issue is slate politics, whether they benefit me or they benefit another person, weaken the movement because good cadres of the movement who happen to be in a slate that I see as wrong get eliminated in the leadership, and that leadership become weaker. Now, I won't use the term that I normally use when I talk of leadership elected of slates, because you see now when we elect according to slates, we all ride on the wave of the leadership of that slate. When work must be done beyond conference, you find a number of fellow travelers. Because it happens at all levels of the movement, comrade. You go to provinces, you find this reality. You go to regions, you find this reality. You go to branches, you find this reality. And therefore, what we are saying is that we have all been talking about how bad slates are for the movement. We should continue talking about that, explaining to members of the ANC that we need branches and branch delegates who analyze the capacity of leaders and elect them on the basis of the capacity, not on the basis of slates. Now, the 2010 NGC appealed to the organization to tighten discipline. Until then, some deviant behaviors, I must submit, were tolerated in the quest for unity that if I go hard, I will be seen to be purging, try to call all of them. But when the NGC, with the advice from the Veterans League, the NEC was told in no uncertain terms that discipline should be tightened. And the leadership also asked, the NGC also asked the leadership to be more decisive and to strengthen organizational processes. Our submission is that we have gone a long way in heeding the advice of the National General Council. Abuse of lobbying in a way that weakens the ANC and focus on personality is a major challenge for the movement. The focus on lobbying must be on deepening democracy in the organization and appreciate the fact that elective conferences are part of the democratic tradition of the ANC over 100 years. That's why after 100 years, the ANC does not only have 4 presidents or two secretaries general, because if you are elected, you are a life president. Only supernatural intervention can remove you. We have 12 presidents, 15 secretaries general over a period of 100 years because elective conferences of the ANC are part of our tradition. So, So the focus, therefore, should never be on personality. It should be on deepening that tool. Because if we blunt that tool, comrade, I can tell you, I've been to conferences internationally where a leader of the party just takes the podium, as I do, and say, comrade, here is the leadership, blah, 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 read it. Any objection, no objection. Do I see any objection, no objection? That is the leadership. In the ANC, we go through painful processes. That's why the so-called disgruntled members will always go to court, because our processes are so involved, and they will go there and try to drill holes in them. Our responsibility is to strengthen the processes and close the loopholes that are identified. When we receive a court order, let's hear what are the reasons. Use them to strengthen our processes, because we must strengthen democracy and never focus on personality in the elections. There are some ANC members, comrade, who behave rude and disrespectful, disrupt ANC gathering, insult leadership of the movement, opponents, assault other people in meetings, or manipulate processes. Manipulation of processes is not so obvious, but the impact of that is that it deprives ANC members participation in legitimate ANC activities. Because when you manipulate processes, you want a predetermined outcome. You try to exclude those who think that will weaken your viewpoint, and therefore you must manipulate the processes and only have the like-minded participating in the process. We must deal with this behavior. The Centenary chapter of in the provinces have contributed in the building of the organization, forging unity and cohesion and building the communities. The Centenary celebration contributed in organizational renewal of the organization. We are going to give you numbers of membership. They are in your report there. You will see that when we started with the Centenary program, the growth of membership was accelerated. We'll come back to that. There is a serious offensive against the ANC. Theme, nothing has changed since 1994. We're better under apartheid. If you have not delivered books in Limpopo, it's a crisis worse than apartheid. Until you explain that, you see, under apartheid, in a classroom, there was one person with a book, and that person was called a teacher. We are now dealing with a different crisis of ensuring that every learner have access to a book. It's a different crisis. It's not the same. So it can't be that, therefore, this ANC government is less than apartheid government because there is a crisis of non-delivery of books in Limpopo. It can't be. It's a different crisis. Yes, it's a crisis, but we must deal with it as a crisis confronting the democratic government. It's not like the apartheid government. Added to this theme would be this current ANC. There's a term that we always ask, sometimes when we receive these messages, we have to ask them, which other ANC do you know? Because you are 25 and 30, and you tell us, this ANC. What is this ANC? Which other ANC do you know? Now, and because of this ANC having moved away from the values, cultures, and tradition of the ANC, therefore there must be change. That's why people will call themselves change, regime change, this change, this change. Because this, comrades, okay, let me explain this, comrade. Let me explain this. Let me explain it. We are the leadership of the ANC here. If there must be change, there are people who have the authority to do so. They changed their title. They changed their title from being members, and they get a new title. They are called delegates. Now, and those delegates, once you enter this hall and you are called delegates, you have a lot of power. It's not our call as leadership that there must be change and so forth. It can't be. It's your call. It's your call. Now, we're raising this issue because this offensive on the movement is driven by a wide range of forces, some from the liberal media and foreign media, some from analysts and commentators, some from disgruntled ex-members, all repeating the theme that discredits this movement. That will ultimately weaken it and defeat it. I can tell you, comrade, we can all disagree here. But there's only one thing that we agree on, all of us, that the ANC must remain strong, because it is a leader of forces of transformation. Our disagreement must be subsumed to that common understanding of what we agree on. That is what we agree on, that we need the ANC for ever than before today, because we need a strong ANC. That strong ANC is not going to be there if intellectuals produced by this movement may think that it is fashionable to attack it from outside and behave as outsiders. Intellectuals of this movement in all the allies, comrades, must come and make intellectual contribution and strengthen the ANC and the broader movement. And that issue, I know, is an issue that can be opened, because many think that when we say so, we want to suppress ideas. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that if an intellectual of the movement, broader movement, stand up and say, if this and that doesn't happen, we will lose power in 2014. It's reckless for an internal intellectual and activist and cadre. That cadre must come to the interaction within the movement and say, let's strengthen the movement. If we're not doing these things right, people out there may lose confidence on the ANC. It's a different matter. It's a total different matter. But once you write a feature article predicting the demise of the ANC, you are hurting the ANC unwittingly, maybe out of love. Now, the NEC therefore agreed on a program of political education, comrades, and the following programs were implemented. The NEC was inducted, that's political, 4 days of political decision, gloves off. We had that, a 4-day political school we had. In addition to that, we had an intensive exchange program between our NEC and the Communist Party of China. 65 of the members of this NEC participated in that program. The attendance of both political programs and exchange program has been not as good as it should be. And I assume that it happens when you reach a particular level of leadership. Sometimes the question of needing to continue learning become weaker and weaker and weaker, and therefore that appetite becomes weaker. And our view is that this program should be continued by the incoming NEC. Stronger, it was too few, little bit late, and we must do it consistently throughout the term. The National Working Committee was elected in the first NEC meeting, and the NWC, processed all the work of the NEC and reported consistently to the NEC. The problem of leaks were reduced over the last 18 months at the level of the NWC. Not totally, it didn't totally disappear, but it came down a little bit. And the NWC continued to visit the provinces. Other people ask, how did we reduce this? I think one of the issues that we did was to open this debate openly, engage it robustly, that leaking information is dangerous. You know, you are a leader of the ANC. You read yourself in the newspaper with a new name. Your new name is an English name called Sauce. What kind of a leader who adopts a new name every weekend is called Sauce? Can't be right, comrade. Can't be right. If you talk to the media or a leader, say so and say, Mdim, quote me by name, but this is my view on this matter, and then you run into problems. It's better than a leader of a glorious movement adopting a new English name, Sauce. Terrible, it's terrible, comrade. It's very terrible. Now, we continued visiting the provinces, focusing in areas with particular organizational problems. I think 4 provinces that are beneficiaries of this program are the Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, Northwest, and the Western Cape, being examples of those beneficiaries. Let's go to subcommittees. We'll summarize the work of the subcommittees, read it in the documents. That is where the meat of the work of the NEC is. 1, the responsibility of subcommittees to refine and monitor implementation of the various policies and decisions of the NEC and Congress and conferences. The report of the work is consolidated into reports to the NGC. In the NGC, you see part of that work, the policy discussion documents to the policy conference, which are before this conference as recommendations to this conference. They captured the work of the subcommittees of the NEC. Almost all the committees were affected with poor attendance. And there were many reasons, we've touched them before. The 52nd National Conference, comrade, in respect of communication, recommitted to building the necessary capacity and deploy the resources to improve its impact and propaganda. Now, that was the commitment that was made in the 15th conference. Guided by this, the committee decided to focus on the following areas. 1 is to strengthen unity and cohesion of the movement, building ANC internal media capacity, and strengthen government communication platforms, media transformation and accountability, establishment of quality broadcasting infrastructure and services, utilization of ICT to address poverty, underdevelopment, and worldwide efforts to bridge the digital and knowledge divide. Some of these issues will not be done by the ANC on its own. That's why we have guests here. These guests must help us strengthen some of these aspects. 3 challenges posed the conference committee had to be attended to immediately. As I said, the recharging of the president, the recall of the president of the republic, the formation of COPE. That became the preoccupation in terms of communication because those were the entry point in attacking the ANC. And because all these issues were emotional, the media gave different interpretation to them. The election campaign in 2009 particularly, and then went to the 2011 one, helped consolidate the media strategy. We moved to a strategy of one message, many voices, that we can deploy all the leaders all over the country. The essence of the message must be one. And the development and the drafting of the manifesto did help us in terms of strengthening this strategy and killed what was described originally as flip-flops. The change of the national spokesperson, you'll recall that early in the term, Comrade James, who was a spokesperson, was redeployed. Comrade Jackson took over, and naturally so, that led to a dip a little bit until the spokesperson found his feet. When he comes, one of those, I hear the NEC members are reminding me, boycott City Press, boycott. Don't buy City Press, don't buy. Now, it took time for this new spokesperson to reach that point, comrade. At the media, we resolved, comrade, to have media appeals tribunal assessed whether it is practical. As a result of that pressure, print media took initiative to improve self-regulatory framework and ultimately appointed the Press Freedom Commission chaired by Chief Justice Langa, retired Chief Justice. Greater degree of stability in the SABC, and we must say, comrade, what came out of that process of the Press Freedoms Commission addressed all the issues that we had with self-regulation. We've sent it to Parliament and said, just look at it whether there's still a need. But from where we are seated, recommendation of the Press Freedom Commission addresses a great deal of the problems. In the report itself, we've listed the issues. Please read them, because once you read them, you will appreciate why we come to that determination. A great degree of stability in the SABC recently. It is still having its problems, but it is not like when we came in 2007, where we had a board that walked to different directions. ICT as a tool to address unemployment, inequality, and poverty. Those are the issues that were the focus of the Communications Committee. The Economic Transformation Committee, comrade, we must say that this committee operates in a challenging environment with active interest from all sectors of society. And currently, the global capitalist crisis and its aftermath. The fact that South Africa registered a negative growth for only 3 quarters is evidence that there is something correct with our policies. This conference presents an opportunity to say what is right that we are doing, that must be reinforced, and what is new that can be introduced to accelerate growth. The new will have to talk to the failure to absorb the new labor market entrance, and thus end high unemployment and reduce poverty and reduce inequality. That is compelling for our movement to focus on that. So we have an opportunity today. Initially, subdivision into task teams for the effective functioning. Post-PGC, the NEC changed that committee and split into 2 to have a committee that deals with policy matters and another that deals with SOEs, state-owned enterprises, and development finance institutions. The 52nd National Conference also directed the NEC to build a strategic, organizational, and technical capability of government, and in particular, an institutional center for government-wide economic planning. Our submission is that by establishing the National Planning Commission, we have implemented this resolution. And that National Planning Commission has produced the first mid-term plan covering a horizon of 20 years. And as President said earlier, that plan, we must take ownership of it. If it has weaknesses, let's work on those weaknesses, strengthen it. Because It is a product of our own decisions and our own interventions. The 52nd National Conference placed emphasis on the state strategic role in shaping key sectors of the economy, including mineral and energy complex. That's what it says. The state-owned mining company was formed as a result of that resolution. We have a state-owned mining company now, still very small, hoping that it can break even quick and begin to generate, because the state-owned, we can't say a profit, it will generate a surplus. Because it's a state-owned mining company, it can't be a profit, it's a surplus. Now, and we must also acknowledge the fact that the ANC Youth League resolution on nationalization of mines added impetus on the ANC taking the responsibility of thinking more deeply and more seriously about the state's role in mineral and energy complex. Half the time, it is criticized that it is nationalization. As we're coming here, Comrade Patrice, the Chamber of Mines, your organization, was attacking us of this nationalization, there's no leadership. The reality of the matter, that resolution from the Youth League forced us to think deep about a country with rich mineral deposits, but even those mining areas are surrounded by abject poverty. So we can't, the decision of the NGC, therefore, to do an in-depth research on this matter and produced the SIMS report that was taken to Paul's conference with resolution coming here. There is another opportunity for us to apply our minds on how best can we improve the performance of the economy in dealing with the three preeminent problems. Now, having said so, comrade, it is quite important that when we deal with those matters, we must link that to the recommendation of the policy conference of moving to the second phase of the transition. And we describe that second phase as radical policy change in economy and social transformation. And resolutions that come out of the economic transformation must talk to that radical change. Now, the conference also directed the NEC to assess the implementation of the Mineral and Petroleum Resource Development Act. We never did that assessment because half the time when we talk about BEE, we normally only limit our discussion to ownership. We never look into the progress made in terms of operational exposure and other aspects that are in that act. And I think it is the responsibility of the African National Congress to apply its mind and look deeply into all the aspects of that transformation program. Centrality of industrial policy to our economic transformation was seen as a serious mandate, hence the establishment of the Ministry of Economic Development. If you take the work of the Economic Development Ministry and you link it to the establishment of the National Planning Commission, once you have those two and you look into their work, reconcile it, and see the program that is emerged there, this conference must talk about how to implement those programs, whether it is the new growth path, whether it is the infrastructure rollout program, whether it is the National Development Plan. It is the duty of this conference to say, how do we put those plans into action? Because good plans on paper give no results. The National Conference, therefore, must do a serious assessment of how effective did we implement that resolution of industrial policy being at the center of the economic policy, EPAP 2, rural development, the establishment of that Ministry of Rural Development, comrade. We must assess how fast can we move to a stage where rural development is sustainable and create economic life in a way, decelerate urbanization. Because as a result of no economic life in rural areas. People live decent homes and come and stay in shacks in Gauteng and the Western Cape, as we saw this, the census 2011 report. So there are 3 areas that needs improvement, comrade, is developing and supporting SMEs, monitoring the work of SOEs, better oversight of DFIs. Education and health. After the 52nd National Conference, we splitted education and health from the Social Transformation Committee, and today we can say that decision was correct. The resolution has been converted into the program for the committee and then became government program of action. The division of education into 2 ministries, one ministry focusing on basic education, the other one on higher education and training, was intended to ensure that there was more focus on each of the areas. The skills development had to respond to the much talked about skills shortage in the economy. The first step was the development of the curriculum and assessment policy statement for each grade. We can report that 8.5 million learners are benefiting from the National School Nutrition Program. Together with the increase in no-fee schools, more children from poor communities can remain in school longer. The ANC has enforced the policy of prohibiting public teachers and other public servants from being councillors. And the reason for that, comrade, I want to repeat here, because many of these comrades, when they are told to resign in one, they complain bitterly, is because if you are a teacher and you are a councillor, you don't do good work in both. You under-deliver in both. So we took this decision that focus in one. If you want to be a councillor, resign as a teacher, be a councillor. If you want to be a teacher, teach, leave council work to people who have time, so that we can have time to be effective in delivering service. We have seen an improvement in matric result over the last 2 years, cumulatively by 10.2%. We're hoping that the 2012 matric results will show a further improvement. Quality issues we're talking about, I must say, comrade, if we look into both the benchmark, which is the 60 countries that are benchmarking each other, against each other, we have improved from being last when we entered. We're now number 52. We remain number last in math and science. Math and science were number last, but overall we've moved from 6 to 52. It is always important to understand that we're not number last in the world. We're number last in mathematics of the 60 countries that took a risk of benchmarking themselves out of 194 countries in the world. So it's 60 out of 194. But let's continue benchmarking ourselves, because just taking that decision is a commitment to improving our education system. Secondly, even if you look into the ANA results, I read all the reports about the ANA's annual national assessment results. You would think that the only thing that was reported was the 13% average on mathematics of grade 9. But that was not the only thing that was reported. Overall, there has been massive improvement. We're battling with math and science. As the president was saying, one of the things that we normally forget is that under apartheid, no black child was allowed to do math and science, because you wouldn't use it in any way. Even those schools that actually demanded it, you can point them, they were limited to 32 learners per class. So the effects of that system are with us now. We're going to take a bit longer to be up to world standard in terms of math and science, but let's continue investing in it and improving that situation. On higher education, comrade, one of the principles that has been promoted is that it should be flexible enough to allow multi-entry and exit, and this must not be at the expense of achieving and maintaining excellence. Many mechanisms have been put in place to increase the access of poor students to tertiary education and number of students. Comrade President didn't talk about the conversion of loans into bursaries. But more important to me, the figures that are interesting, you'll find them in your report, is the increase in the number of students in FET colleges. In 2009, there were 332,000 students in FET colleges. In 2012, we have 690 students in FET colleges, almost double the number. Now, that progress, comrade, we must work on it, sustain it, because FET graduates are actually at the center of economic growth. It is not an engineer who unblocks a block sewer. It is an artisan. And it is FET colleges that generate sufficient artisans. So let's invest a lot in FET colleges. The student population in universities has increased from 760,889 in 2007. It is now standing at 938,000 in 2012, actually in 2011, meaning that we are going to have a population in university of over 1 million very, very soon. And we must be ready for that as the African National Congress. This increase, comrade, in the demand for higher education informed the decision to build the two universities, one in Mpumalanga and one in the Northern Cape. That work will start in 2013. On health, comrade, the roadmap on health was translated into 10-point plan by both the subcommittee and government. Poor leadership and poor management capacity was identified as being at the center of the near collapse of health services in a number of provinces. This was addressed with the ministry and the ANC by re-advertising all the strategic positions. I can tell you, comrade, when we assessed skills, provinces know this story because it was a shocking story, where there was a big number of teachers, good educators, who were made to manage health facilities and hospitals. It's a disaster, comrade, once we do that. We even found other skills that are totally relevant. In one case, we found a meat inspector running a hospital in one province, you know. Now, these, comrades, are not exaggerations. That's why we had to re-advertise all those posts. If we agree on that, comrade, we'll go very far. The green paper on national health insurance and the 11 pilot projects were launched in April 2012. The white paper will be released in 2013. Central to this, comrade, is re-engineering of the primary health care. To build human resources, the Cuban medical training program have been expanded from 60 in 2010 to 1,000 students in 2012. We have HIV counseling and testing campaign has been showing success. Over 20.2 million have been tested over the last 2 years. Access to ARVs, IRTs has also been increased. Broadly, these campaigns have shown fruits, and life expectancy has increased from 56 years in 2009 to 60 years in 2011. Child mortality of children under 5 has decreased from 56 in 2009 to 42 per thousand in 2011. Infant mortality rate has decreased from 40 in 2009 to 30 in 2011. Mother-to-child transmission, comrade, has been coming down from 8.5% in 2008, 3.5% in 2010, 2.7% in 2011. That is the impact of the program that have been implemented. Now, we were directed by the conference in 2007 to establish a state-owned pharmaceutical company. We can report that Kitla Pila has been established in February 2012. In partnership with a Swiss pharmaceutical company. And that work has started. We're hoping to see production very soon because we were shocked by the understanding that South Africa is the home to 0.7% of the world population, home to 17% of HIV-infected people, home to 25% of ARV treatment consumption. It was just ironic, we're the smallest, but we consume more than anybody, and we continue buying everywhere else except from ourselves. So this resolution has been implemented. The science and technology, comrade, is part of this committee, and that department, comrade, I must not talk, that department continues to enhance knowledge generation capacity in order to produce world-class research papers and turn findings into advantage for South Africa. And for a long time, we didn't pay sufficient attention to science and technology. South Africa was given the bid to host 70% of SKA telescope in May 2012. SKA was quite an important project for South Africa. It is the square kilometer array. Square kilometer array. So, comrade, we must be serious about science and technology in all disciplines. International relations, the subcommittee is doing relatively good work despite experiencing certain problems of poor attendance. Party-to-party relations, guided by the principles adopted by the 52nd National Conference, received a lot of attention in our work. Regular meeting among former liberation movements has reduced the negative perceptions and improved the relationship. I can tell you, comrade, that liberation movements, all of them can say, when they talk nice, they say, we shared the trenches, but there's deep-seated suspicion of each other all the time. Now, when we meet every 6 months, we have dealt with those suspicions aggressively, sometimes very robustly. Sometimes we walk away and drink coffee and come back. So that has improved that area. We've improved that area of work. We've also strengthened the relationship with governing parties in the continent. The ANC has strengthened our relation with few parties in East Africa. We can do more work in that area. One of the challenges that faces us is to analyze how best Africa can assert itself in the light of a conflict between AU decisions and resolutions and actions of NATO and erstwhile colonial powers, as we have seen in Libya and as we are currently seeing in Syria. What can be done to strengthen AU in the face of an aggressive Euro West, because Euro and US sometimes agree and they come very aggressively on Africa. We must discuss that issue because that should have been a point of learning for us. We can do more to support the struggle for democracy in Swaziland, which is our neighbor. How can we best support the new chairperson of the AU Commission? It's nice and well when we all campaign and say, right, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. When she is there, she can't depend on donor funding from Europe, because if she, one who holds the purse, pulls the strings, we can't compromise Comrade Nkosazana by not deciding on material support for her, having been elected to that position. We've started good work in West Africa, and our relations with the Communist Party of China, the Communist Party of Cuba, and the Indian Congress, Indian National Congress have improved and intensified. The good party relations improve relationship at government level. We are maintaining relations with all social democratic parties in Europe. We must register the point that sometime when they sponsor training in the region, and in that sponsorship they have a condition that you must also involve opposition. It is informed by difference in the conceptual framework, because to them they say democracy is perfect when there are many parties. And this liberation movement are just too strong. They have more than 60% vote in their countries. It's better when it is 51, 52. We must engage them in that conceptual difference. The ANC must expand our relations in South North America, where our presence is too weak. We hosted the Socialist International Conference, and that provided an opportunity to broaden our understanding and commitment to participate more actively in the Socialist International. We must develop the details of the required changes for the transformation of multilateral institutions. On legislature and governance, transformation of the judiciary is quite important, comrades. This work overlaps with the work that happens in peace and stability. Transformation of the legislative institution, including transformation of local government, is quite important. Transformation of the executive institution of state, conceptualization of an inclusive government system, integration of its work with that of other subcommittees. The team dealt with the reincorporation of Mirafong into Gauteng, but the NSC at that point, I want comrades from Matatiel, from Mutse, from Hamtibi, to listen carefully. At that point, we took a decision that changes in boundaries should not be the preoccupation. Instead, we should de-emphasize boundaries and create soft boundaries among provinces. So what that means is that comrades must access service to the nearest point they are at. If you are in Matatiel and there is a good service in Kokstad, you must not be required to go to Mtata for a service. Cross that boundary and go to Kokstad and get that service. If there is a cost, it should be provincial governments that talk to each other about that cost. The floor crossing legislation was repealed as directed by conference. The incoming NEC comrade must still review the formula used to calculate proportional allocation of seats in local government. It's one of the most complicated formulas, Valley. It's one of the most, is if you win 70% of what seats in the proportional allocation, you are likely to get nothing, because they say you have got your 70 already in the wards, so you get nothing. That formula disadvantages us when we do well. We like it when we don't do well. I must also say that there are areas where we don't do well, we like it, but it's a complicated formula. It must be straightforward and be proportional. The question of a single public service has proved to be very complex and very slow to complete. It is incomplete. Scientific assessment of the efficacy of both local and provincial government must be done to inform the discussion on the review of provinces. We're raising this point, comrade, because from time to time there's this question that let's review province, let's review. What is it that we want to review about provinces? We can't just have a principle that we must review provinces. We're saying, in our assessment, this is the performance and the role of provinces. They're doing well here, they can be strengthened here, and then take an informed decision. Our view is that let's dig deep before we take a decision that may be regretted much later. The fight against corruption, comrade, is bearing results, and the ANC must lead society in this regard. Institutions that fight corruption must be supported more strongly by the ANC. There must be no question about the ANC supporting institutions fighting corruption. And that means we must emphasize over and over that the most effective deterrent against corruption is arrest, prosecution, and conviction. If we don't have a high success rate in conviction, there is no real deterrent against corruption. And the ANC must lead in terms of that position and be in the leadership of society, broadly. Two urgent outstanding activities, comrade, is that the directive to put together an ANC ethics committee and developing a post-employment rules for public representatives and senior public servants, that work has not been completed. The Women's Ministry has been established as per resolution of conference. One of the biggest challenges is building capacity of the state to do basic tasks that are reasonably expected from the state. We must move away from a tender state and have a state that is effective. That is the point we're making. In terms of the National Disciplinary Committee, this committee dealt with only 3 cases involving 5 members. 2 of them in the party, 2 of them in parliament. Those were the cases that were dealt by the National Disciplinary Committee. There is a recommendation made by the NDC that we should improve political and organizational work at all levels to uphold our fundamental goals. If you can look, comrade, into many of these cases, they reflect weak political understanding and low ideological awareness. And if we can do that, we can resolve many of our problems. But if we don't invest in that area, these problems will persist. The induction must include understanding of the rights and responsibilities of members and processes followed in cases of violation of Constitution. Mechanisms must be in place to deal with ill discipline in a consistent and decisive manner. Leaders must desist from representing and giving evidence for members. That is the recommendation. And we must allow constitutional amendments that prohibit paid lawyers from being engaged as representatives in disciplinary processes of the ANC. The ANC must train our members to distinguish between robust debate and competition and ill discipline. These are the recommendations made by the National Disciplinary Committee based on the experience of these last 5 years. National Disciplinary Committee of Appeal has dealt with 156 cases, the overwhelming majority of which involve public representatives. Chaos in many municipalities points to the need for raising the political awareness and ideological outlook at local government level. I can tell you, comrades, that is one area where there is a general decline in terms of organizational discipline. We can cite cases, whether it is in Muma and in Pashe, where cases just cause havoc. You go to talk with Potchefstroom. ANC is a majority party by 11 councillors. They hand over mayorship to a DA. And we can give you all sorts of cases. And it means, comrades, This kind of behavior at local government points to a direction that we must tighten discipline at that level and strengthen political education. That's the point we're making. There is a general decline in the level of discipline across all levels of the ANC, which has adverse effects on the ANC's ability to serve the people. Levels of discipline increase in the run-up to major events, which point to the importance of contestation for position. Because all of a sudden, when there must be contestation for position, we want to do away with all the rules. However, there was a decrease in the number of cases before the NDCA after the 2010 NGC. And the NDCA makes an observation that members of the NEC listen carefully to the warning given by the veterans of the movement. The NDCA and NDC recommend to National Conference that, 1, there should be sufficient members appointed to serve on all the disciplinary committees. To limit them to 5, make it unworkable, so that cases can be dispensed with expeditiously, and the responsibility spread among more comrades than having few comrades dealing with these cases. Investigative units should be established to assist the chief national presenter and the chief provincial presenter. Because if you are a presenter, it is much demanding to do your own research and investigation on cases. It is proposed that pre-hearing conferences be held in appropriate cases. Major weaknesses in the system is the lack of understanding of the ANC constitution by members and the inability of many branches and regions through lack of training to conduct disciplinary proceedings as envisaged in the constitution. Many of those decisions are reversed because most of the time it is the anger and the emotion that determines the hearing. Once you go to higher structures, those findings cannot stand the test. It is recommended that the decision of the NDC and NDCA be used to generate a manual to educate people. On the Peace and Stability Committee, the committee has found that the resolution on a single police service is quite complex and difficult to implement, despite the fact that there is cooperation between SAPS and municipal police, particularly in major municipalities. But integration is still very far, and what we are saying, comrades, is that we should reassure ourselves that, is this workable? Is it the direction that we want to? Why is that so? The Directorate for Special Crimes, HOCS, has been established in terms of the resolution of the 52nd National Conference after the dissolution of the Scorpions. The Military Veterans Department has been established, but MKMVA is expressing unhappiness with the progress being made in addressing concerns of especially indigent military veterans. The growing trend of lawlessness and violent strikes is a challenge. We must emphasize that the survey by COSATU, which point to the fact that workers start believing strongly that violence is part of finding demand settled quicker, is quite a dangerous emerging trend. That's why you'll find a situation that a truck driver will jump and the truck runs this way and the driver drives this way and the police chases the truck and nobody is arrested. Basically, there is totally lawlessness in the country, and I think we should pay attention to that in that regard. The ANC must develop a more comprehensive approach to the management of immigration. This approach must be both politically sensitive and have policies that address national challenges. The transformation of the judiciary is bearing the fruit in as far as it is giving more access to poorer South Africa to the courts. On policy, this committee is a committee that coordinates the work of all committees. Under this committee, there are 3 points that we want to raise. The first one is that the Policy Institute, as resolved, has been secured. We are now having a Policy Institute owned by the ANC, but what is outstanding is to improve its research capacity. We wouldn't mind if we have some few business leaders here who says we can partner with you in doing that research so that we resource it and create bigger research capacity. As long as you know that you will have no copyright on the research result, it will be the ANC research, even if you will partner with us. But it's quite an important initiative to have that a policy institute and do research. And that one has been secured. We have a policy institute now. We don't have sufficient research capacity. The SIMS report was coordinated from that policy institute. Many people don't know that. When that research on mining was done, it was coordinated from the Policy Institute. And the committee drives the drafting of many documents, ranging from manifestos, provides research and support. The monitoring and evaluation unit has been established in the head office and it is doing good work. It has produced at least two reports over the last year. Again, it is also affected by minimal staffing and limited research. What is important about that is that monitoring and evaluation helps you assess progress, drill deep, and look into the impact. On political education, comrade, the conference resolution asked the NEC to establish a physical political school. Now, I'm making this emphasis because sometimes there's this contradiction in the discussion, even at NC level, that the political school can't wait for a physical building. We agree. But the resolution is there must be a physical political school to institutionalize political education. That, and we're directed to pay more attention and put more energy on cadre development and accumulation of knowledge. A site for the school has been secured. We have got a farm for the political school, but the actual building is still not there. Now, if it's a farm, many farmers here may take their cattle there. That is not political education. We must put a school there so that it becomes a political school. The building has been delayed due to, if funding is always a challenge for an organization like the ANC. We don't have platinum mines, Comrade Patrice. If you can donate 2 of them, we can build that school quick there. The committee, comrade, has a dysfunctional start because its first chairperson in this term defected to cope. The committee developed a comprehensive program with a detailed curriculum. Political education has been taking place throughout the country at all levels to varying degrees. Gauteng has been doing especially well in this area. I know every time you talk about the Walter Sisulu Academy in Gauteng, KZN gets very agitated and said, what about us? We're doing a lot of work. KZN is doing well in political education. We're just highlighting this question of Gauteng because it has actually moved on, established an academy, and very consistent and institutionalized education. And we're raising that thing, comrade, so that provinces must be jealous of each other and begin to say, can we go and have a look what is in that program? And then begin to do work and have a standard in the political education. The leagues have been involved in the committees, although we must say that one of the leagues that has been consistent in running its political education has been the Youth League, by the way. Because they have run their programs, they have coordinated their own programs, And that creates an opportunity for the ANC to get in there and provide leadership and guidance to the Youth League, because there is a consistent political education in the Youth League. The committee ran political school for the NEC. It has also run sessions of political education in the National Parliament. One of the things that suffered for resources is the publishing of Mkhabulo, forcing the potential contributors who write for Mkhabulo to find alternative avenues for expressing their views. Because people who write know that you can only retain that skill by writing. You can't retain it by spectating. Therefore, if you don't publish Mkhabulo, we write for somebody else. By the time you want them, you don't get them. And we think we should pay attention to that. The Political Education Training Unit was active in training the SPLM in Sudan for its in South Sudan for its first ever elections, and runs the SADC Policy Forum as part of its international program. Social transformation, comrade, has made significant progress over the last 17 years. There is a lot of progress in the emancipation of women, although much more can be done. ANC can go beyond theoretical debate to concrete implementation of Rule 6 at all levels of the organization. Rule 6 of the Constitution is one that stipulates that in any elected structure of the ANC, it doesn't say 50-50. Many people say it's 50-50. It doesn't say 50-50. It says at least 50% must be women. If women are more than 50%, there is no big deal. There is only a big deal when they are less than 50%. That is the essence of that clause of the Constitution. Now, there are areas where comrade, where we are battling. If you can look into areas of deployment, sometimes we don't fulfill this requirement. We try to enforce it in the municipal elections, in the appointment of mayors and speakers. Many provinces did comply, but there was a different debate after that, after complying, that it doesn't help to go to a province, take all the municipalities with a revenue base, give them to male mayors, and appoint female mayors in all the municipalities that have no revenue base. You are setting them up for failure. There was one particular province that was very sensitive to that. It has 2 metros. It gave one to a male and one to a female. District municipalities, 2 to, is it 2? Or, there are 8, 4 to males and 4 to females. So we're making that point, comrade, because it should not just be compliance, because when it is just compliance, malicious compliance, it will not give us the results in the long term. Now, the role of sport in building social cohesion and as an economic activity deserve more attention from the ANC. The movement can do more work in the area of transformation of sport. We are not as vocal as we should be when it comes to this matter. That's why you'll find that you will never discover Tsotsobe until Makayantini disappears. Once Makayantini disappears, all of a sudden you discover Tsotsobe. You see, the same applies to cricket. You will have Adams as a bowler, and it disappears. Only then do you discover Philander. And discover, where was Philander all the time? Because we're not vocal enough. In rugby, they put all these guys, and they rather take a scrum half, play wing, than giving a chance to Mvovo to play as a natural wing. Because ANC activists do not see sport transformation as their interest. On the question of the headquarters, comrade, we have been working very hard to build capacity under trying conditions. I'm not going to take you through, but I can tell you that there have been an effort to staff, provinces, the leagues, and and the head office was still a long way to go if we want to be a real, efficient, competitive head office. At this point in time, we've started. We can build on the work that we've started. The membership, we're asked to take all the practical steps to achieve 1 million members, and Imvuselo campaign was launched in 2010 to achieve this. The president was the recruiter in chief, but provinces have also done well in this drive. Our membership is now at 1,220,057 members. And I think we should commend the province. Maybe let me take you to the membership of provinces, because sometimes 1 million is a universal figure. You'll recall that in 2007, the Eastern Cape had 153,000. It is now at 187,000. The Free State was at 61,000. It is now at 121,000. Gauteng was at 59,000. It is now at 134,000. KZN was in 102,000. It is now at 331,000. Limpopo was at 67,000. It is now at 161,000. Mpumalanga was at 54,000. It is now at 132,000. Northern Cape has declined from 37,000 to 36,000. And the Northwest has improved its membership from 47,000 to 75,000. The Western Cape has grown marginally from 36,000 to 38,000. So that more than million members are not in the head office, they are in the provinces. And I think we should give the provinces a round of applause for that. Political education, comrade, should empower the branches to do their mandate role and combat gatekeeping and other forms of deviant behavior. There are two biggest enemies of the ANC when it comes to recruitment. It's something we've called gatekeeping, where people recruit selectively. And the recruits is stepped up towards a BGM or a regional conference, and you only recruit those who will agree with you. Those who will not agree with you, you lock them out. And the other one is one that is called bulk buying, where people go and recruit members in bulk. We suspect that they even pop up the money for those. Those become members of my members. I become members. And these members do not believe in the ANC. They believe in me because I buy that membership. They never attend meetings. When you call BGMs, they can't correct. That's why even when we read credential, you'll find many provinces with branches that have not corrected, because some of these members have not been read the pledge of joining the African National Congress. They are paper members. And we must change that situation. We say those two are problems and challenges facing the ANC now. Now, what we need to do is to transform that quantity into quality now. The membership has improved, and the ANC must invest resources in this. That is membership management. We still battle, comrade, to find an efficient membership system. We've tried many things. We have not succeeded in having. And maybe we must go and sit with pirates and chiefs, and maybe sundowns, pirates and chiefs, and maybe some and say, how do they keep this membership of their supporters? We continue to run into circles trying to get this efficient membership system. We're not winning. This membership is in 4,007 branches of the ANC. Of those, 33,687 have qualified to be in this conference. This means, comrade, 14% of ANC branches could not qualify to be in this conference because 620 branches of the ANC could not qualify to be in this conference. That is a high figure. High figure. There is a little or no political activism in many of these branches. There are branches of conferences and elections. When there's no major event coming, branches die. And I think that should be changed. The ANC must do more to empower branches so that we can intensify the work of the ANC at branch level. That is what will make the ANC different to other parties. The Eastern Cape went through a challenging period immediately after the 57th National Conference, but it is doing relatively better now. I don't want to say well. There is still a lot of improvement that can be achieved in the Eastern Cape. There are challenges in some regions, and these are being addressed. Relationship with the leagues and MKMVA is good overall. There were tensions between the PEC of the Eastern Cape and that of the Youth League as a result of a resolution taken in a conference to work tirelessly for the PEC to be disbanded. Obviously, that causes a lot of tension and difficulties there. But that has improved now. The alliance works well in the province with functioning program of action. The next provincial conference of this province will be in 2013. In the Free State, the province held this conference in 2008 and was more cohesive then. They were heavily impacted by defection following the formation of COPE. By 2010, signs of divisions in the PEC were visible, and this flows into the regions and other structures. BGM's regional conference and provincial conference were affected by the tensions. These are being addressed. The second conference was held in June 2012. The elected a new PEC. It is this new PEC that has been declared unlawful and invalid by the Constitutional Court. I don't want to raise my question about how did that case get into the Constitutional Court, what are the constitutional considerations that are there. I don't want to get into that, but the Constitutional Court has declared that PEC as unlawful and invalid. We are dealing with that case. The Constitutional Court is now will have to respect that judgment. And we are going to organize a fresh provincial conference. That's what we do every day. Organizing provincial conferences is our work. It is not the work of the courts. And we are going to organize another new conference because that is our responsibility, really. The relationship with the leagues was affected by the tension in the province. However, this is showing signs of improvement. Gauteng was affected and targeted specifically by the establishment of COPE. This caused greater cohesion in ANC structures. The regions and structures are relatively stable as a result of constant political work and activism. But we must also say that relative stability now following disbandment of two regions and relaunching them. The leagues in the province work closely with the PEC. The alliance is working well in the province and has many joint programs and campaigns. The province's political education, we want to put it as leading, and they're doing well in that regard. KZN is one of the most stable provinces with good political and organizational work. It is this organizational capacity that has given it its ability to withstand and unite in the face of many challenges, particularly the political assassinations that are prevalent in the province. If there was no organizational capacity, I can tell you, comrades, that that province will be in disarray by now. Regions are now more stable after initial turbulence in regions like Emalahleni, the incident of assassination in the Tegwini region, and a phenomenon that continues to be a source of worry for the movement. The PEC actively manages the relationship with the leagues. The relationship with the Women's League and the Veterans League is good. There are challenges in the relationship with the ANC Youth League, particularly after the peace of the Youth League was disbanded and the PTT was put in place. If you talk to the Youth League, they will tell you that there are problems there because the ANC want to control our structures. Maybe. But the reality is that there are tensions there, and I think they can be attended to. But if you can have the Provincial Conference of the Youth League and elect a new Provincial Executive Committee, that will accelerate the mending of those relations. The alliance relation is good, and partners have joined programs. Limpopo, comrade, the chairperson became the premier when a sitting premier defected to cope. The NEC deployees contributed to the stability in the province. Divisions emerged in the middle of the term and became stronger in the run-up to the provincial conference in December, which was robust and heavily contested. The results were disputed and after investigation upheld by the NEC. The PEC was suspected of purging those who held different preferences, and tensions and deep mistrust remain. That is one task that the incoming NEC must attend to in Limpopo. The PEC works closely with the league structures. The alliance relations started off well, but now have collapsed totally. You will recall, comrades, that it is in Limpopo where you would have running campaigns, marches to the office of the premier, and tensions go like you never believe. And I think it's an issue that we should attend to as the African National Congress. Mpumalanga, the province used to suffer from infighting, and the NEC decided to pay more attention to the province. This is bearing fruit in that the province is more stable. The problem of late politics weakened the province to an extent, and the province needs to step up its political education. We're making this point, comrade, not to say there is a weak PEC in Mpumalanga, but we're saying, you see, the disappearance of relatively developed cadres of the movement in all this fight. If it continues that way, after every round, we lose 2 or 3 good comrades. Next round, we lose 2, 3. Actually, that structure is going to be weak in the long term. That's the point we're making. There is an interaction with the leagues. The Youth League has, however, been disbanded by the PEC in a way that we still want to understand, causing a lot of tensions with the Youth League there. And I can tell you, as a result of that, the Deputy Secretary General of the Youth League stages sitting in my office every week and ask the question, how can the PEC there disband the Youth League? It's our responsibility. Then I ask, if more than half of your PEC members have resigned, do you have a PEC to disband? And then the discussion goes on. But the reality of the matter, comrade, is that the responsibility of ANC structures is to help the Youth League do the right thing. It can't be our responsibility to jump the gun and run ahead of them and weaken it. It can't be. The Women's League is beginning to rebuild after a long period of dysfunctionality, and the peace of the ANC support them, and the Veterans League is yet to launch. The alliance is working, and the National Alliance Secretariat had to intervene twice when there was public disputes between the leaders of the alliance in that province. When they fight, comrade, they stop talking to each other. when they go to meetings, everyone have an okapi in the pocket. And we have to say, hey, comrade, let's search you every time you go to a meeting. It can't continue that way. But at least now there's quietness and some stability. But there has been tensions in Mpumalanga. In the Northwest, comrade, the province started the culture of physical fight in ANC conferences. In a highly contested conference in 2008, the province was marked by allegation of leaders having secret COPE membership and affiliation, and this proved to be untrue, but the reality of the matter is that these labels continue to divide that province on an ongoing basis, because when they accuse one, they circulate SMSs like mad, and the SMS go there, and we have to receive. I receive all of them. They come to me and they say, I receive, it's 20 today from the Northwest. They are just saying all sorts of things because they are labeling each other. And I think that problem is weakening that province. We must attend to it. The province, the NEC disbanded the PEC and appointed a PTT with a view of stabilizing the province. The next conference was held in February 2011, and delegates tried to integrate different groupings into one team. But this is not working well, comrades. We can report that. Because comrades continue working as groupings within the structure. Now, when that happens, you'll find a situation of leaders walking on both ends of the street. You'll have to check whether they're going to the same direction in any way. And it is bleeding the Northwest a great deal. The assassination of comrades is becoming a feature of the province and a worrying threat, with the latest one being the assassination of Comrade Chika. The Northern Cape used to be quite divided and lost comrades to cope. The province has now stabilized and compensated for its small numerical side with quality of its contribution. The regions are now relatively stable after a period of turbulence after the 57th National Conference in a number of the regions. The leagues are working well in the province, and the ANC Women's League has won the Charlotte Maxeke Award for the last 2 years. The alliance structure has worked well at provincial level, but the challenge is in cascading this down to regional and branch level. The Western Cape, comrades, was very divided, as reported earlier. With the intervention of the NEC, we thought that the province will grow out of that. But the reality of the matter is that the province was seriously affected by the formation of COPE. The NEC disbanded that PEC, appointed a PTT. A conference was convened in February 2011. This is the conference where you had the delegates almost split into half, not agreeing on anything. This was highly contested. The NEC recognized the outcome. The Western Cape remains divided. Although the population has increased, comrade, that is the effect of that division. You see, the Western Cape has grown. It is now the fourth biggest province in the country, after Gauteng, KZN, and the Eastern Cape. Then it is the Western Cape in size of provinces. But in terms of the ANC membership, the Western Cape is the second smallest, marginally bigger than the Northern Cape. You know that in the Northern Cape, there are very few people there. It's big in land. Everyone, you can have 1,000 hectares of land on your own there, and there will be no problem. It's quite a big problem. But the reality of the matter is that the Western Cape is going neck to neck with the Northern Cape. That captures the problem, that a divided province can never build an organization effectively. Now, the leagues are weak. Leagues are weak there. The alliance structures do not meet as the alliance. They resort to bilateral meetings. The province is active in some campaign, but this needs to be translated into presence in communities. We must still continue paying attention to the Western Cape. It is not out of the woods. Let's go to the leagues. The Veterans League was launched in December 2009 as per resolution of the 52nd National Conference. Dual membership requirement, you are a veteran of the ANC, you can't be a member of the Veterans League and not be a member of the ANC. It will be strange. Eh? It will be strange. That membership is important, that keep the membership up to date. You must be a member in good standing as a veteran. That is exemplary. The requirement is 60 years of age, 40 years of verifiable involvement in the ANC. Otherwise, if we are beginning to ban that, and I think the ANC must help the Veterans League to do the verification, because if we ban that rule, we are going to have a Veterans League of pensioners than a Veterans League of veterans. And I don't think we should allow that we should have a Veterans League of pensioners. We must have a Veterans League of veterans. Proven record of more than 40 years in the ANC, unbroken service. The veteran is active in all the provinces, but face many challenges associated with the long life, ill health, age, death. Structurally, the veterans also have challenges of office space, lack of financial resources, organizational challenges. For example, one of the benefits wanted to have from the Veterans League was tap into the experience and the wisdom. But when it behaves the same as any other structure, then we are not getting that benefit. Attention must be paid to the veterans. Up to now, the ANC has not benefited optimally from this important structure. The intervention in the National General Council was quite an important intervention, and we hope that the Veterans League will draw a lesson out of that and understand that it is accorded a particular special status of intervening at any time, at any level, but if it becomes ordinary, it gives up that right. On the Women's League, it continues to be a critical voice for the emancipation of women, but much more can be done. The Women's League can also be more active in other organizational areas. Basically, we don't want to relegate the Women's League into just focusing on women issues. It must be political, it must be ideological. It must take up organizational matters more. There has been renewed emphasis on building vibrant branches, and the branches have increased from 1,504 in 2008 to 2,534 in 2012. The challenge now is to empower those branches to develop concrete programs. The women's leagues tend to be beset by many of the same challenges the ANC, fighting for position, firm lobbying groups, stifling progress, and almost what we see in the ANC gets replicated in the Women's League from time to time. It's active in many campaigns with particular focus on gender-based violence. The Youth League, comrade, remains the very important body of opinion within the ANC. This league had a rowdy and anarchic conference in 2008. The relationship with the mother board started off well, and the Youth League complemented many ANC programs and campaigns. The relation deteriorated quite dramatically in that the Youth League began to preempt decisions of the ANC and make announcements even on decision of the structures of the ANC. That is where everything started. The question of public spares was also quite prevalent. The leadership of the ANC engaged the Youth League, but the improvements, if any, were not noticeable. The former president of the Youth League was charged in 2010, and the case was settled. And the ANC Youth League continues to its unruly behavior after that, until there was another round where ANC members leading the ANC again found themselves in trouble. It continues to make a valuable contribution, comrade, to the ANC, and it is incumbent upon the ANC itself to nurture the Youth League to remain that critical body of opinion within the ANC. In other words, we don't have the luxury of saying the Youth League, we're giving up on it. We can't give up. We must engage, we must guide, we must nurture. On the alliance, the SACP remains a reliable ally. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Leave the entrepreneurs and all that. Leave that. But as an organization, it is a reliable ally and display commitment to the programs of the alliance, except where there are specific disagreements. Disagreement mostly dealt with in terms of specified procedures and alliance structures. The mass-based growth of the party has brought its own challenges. We must remember that, comrade, historically, no member of the Communist Party was not a member of the ANC. Once you have a mass party where non-ANC members can be members of the party, you are dealing with a very complicated ally, because its character can easily drift into looking like the trade union. It's a trade union most. You organize working class now, but you organize a wonke umuntu. Into eziba ungene pha into yoba you are working in that workplace, then you get organized. Now, a party can't be like that. That you should be an activist to be a member of the party is quite an important requirement, but it is complicating it now. Both the ANC and the party should engage in the analysis and political education and see how can these two organizations complement. There is too little cross-pollination between the two organizations. This has a limited effect on ideological growth. COSATU, the relationship has mainly been stable and tension arise around the federation's public posture. Half the time when COSATU raised this issue and appear to be fighting, theoretical, conceptual, and ideological, you find that there are very few differences. But the difference is on the public posture, because when you articulate it, your view, in a way that is not different to that of the opposition, in the public mind, you are now seen to be an opposing force. And I think what we should be dealing with at the level of the federation is that public posture without suppressing the right of the federation to articulate views that affect its members. And that can only be understood, comrade, when you understand the interclass character of the alliance. Rightfully so, both the party and COSATU will be impatient on some issues. I don't think we can blame COSATU when it is unhappy with it all or labor brokers. But we must be concerned when COSATU say will promote lawlessness and break things down and say publicly. When their members ban things, we don't know where that comes from. That is the only aspect. But being impatient with it all, labor brokers, it's an issue that we should understand, because they represent a class and an interest. But how that is articulated is the matter. Now, and this, what complicates negotiation is when COSATU calls for strike in the middle of discussions. Comrades too. Siyathetha ngapha. Siyaqhuba. Ubiza national strike uyamatsha kugcwele yonke indawo. Yeah. Sisephi kwasibonda ngoku. Siqhube sithetha or samkele memorandum sinibhalele back. That's the issue. Processes, comrade, must be managed within the alliance structures. It's quite important, because if we don't, we will discredit each other, and there will be nothing left of all of us. Now, we made an observation, comrade, having attended a number of conferences of COSATU, that half the time the Federation gets too preoccupied with analyzing the ANC and ignore doing its own internal analysis. Now, let's give a few examples. You know, if you see the developments like the Marikana, the Torrens, you can look at all of them. Those are reflecting signs within the trade union movement. And we don't give ourselves time to analyze the weaknesses and strength of the trade union movement, because we think ANC is we are perfect. Actually, and Lalim Chinin is 7 factory of join ANC. It's not the other way around. It's not the other way around. Some of them Chinin and Chaisa is our ANC. Nibuye, Nim Chinin, Chaisa is our ANC all the time. And therefore, comrade, the recent wave of strikes point the alliance partners to the need to pay more attention in strengthening the trade union movement. It's not a COSATU responsibility, it's a responsibility of all of us to strengthen the trade union movement. Sango, comrade, is reactivating its structures, but it's still at the beginning stage. South Africa needs a very strong progressive civic movement, and where Sango has no structure, the space is filled by local initiative. Sango must engage with these structures to bring them closer to the liberation movement. It's not new. Before we had Sango, we had township-based civic organizations, and we knitted them together. When they are local structures, we must not all the time see them as being in competition with Sango. Sango must go there, reach out, organize those local initiatives into Sango. That's how you build a strong civic movement. And it doesn't help for a civic movement to be populist in pronouncement and be invisible in action. Now, the functioning of the alliance, comrade, we think the alliance is working relatively well at national level, but the year 2012 has been challenges because 3 of the allies had national conferences and congresses, and formal alliance meeting had to be taken place less regular than normal. This has been the only year where we didn't have an alliance summit over the last 5 years. We experienced the reality of being an interclass alliance on issues such as e-toll, labor brokers, protection of stake information bill. The alliance functions better when we discuss our differences rather than attacking each other in public. There was considerable cooperation in drafting the 2009 manifesto. The debate on the alliance as a strategic center of power took a lot of time over the last 5 years. It's an issue that must be settled at this point in time. But if we are to settle it, we must elevate it above fears of not being consulted seriously. Therefore, artificially want to create the alliance into a structure. These parties, that's why it is an interclass alliance, don't melt into a structure and an organization called the alliance. They have different long-term visions and they will pursue them. And that's why it becomes always important when we have a program of the alliance. We must always appreciate, for some it is a minimum program. It may be close to be a maximum for others. But if we don't understand that it escapes us, we're going to continue fighting and tearing each other apart. The allies must begin to internalize where there are clashes of personalities. They must be dealt with within the alliance structures and not allow them to be an obstacle to alliance engagement. Alliance work relatively well, but we can do more. Let me come to the electoral performance. I'm about to finish, comrade. And I can't stop before I finish this report because This is a report. It's the scorecard. We're accounting. Please be patient with us. The difficulties explained in the report impacted on our initial ability to fight the 2009 elections. We united, mounted more coherent campaign, and eventually received 65.9% of the vote. A decline in percentage term, but an increase in real numbers. We got 65.9%, which was a decline in percentage term, but in terms of the actual voters, we got 11.6 million voters from 10.8 the previous election. Sometimes that explanation is not given. It's just a decline. It's not look nice. It's two graphs, one looking down, one looking up. There was a measurable correlation between the performance of COPE and the decline growth of the ANC. Where the COPE established itself significantly, there was a visible decline in the performance of the ANC. You have that comparison in your report. The 52nd National Congress said the ANC must improve community involvement in the selection process for candidates. For 2012 local government elections, we started that process, implementing that resolution. We developed and distributed guidelines on this to our structures, but the guidelines were applied variably. Communities were aggrieved and threatened not to vote because when we tested our candidates in communities, they thought that they were electing a candidate. When the candidate they preferred didn't become the real candidate, they threatened not to vote for the ANC. The president had to promise that the ANC would attend to the complaints of and our people voted for the ANC. You'll see your figures in page 61 of your report, and it illustrates that performance. The ANC received 63% of the votes, which is, others say, when they want to prove that there's something happening in the state, it's a major decline from 66% to 63%. What they don't explain is that trace the trends from 1994. Every time local government is 4% less than the national provincial election performance. I don't know what is the scientific explanation for that, but it has always been a trend. One of the issues is that the turnout is not the same. And other thing is that when there is a higher turnout, the ANC doesn't perform proportionately to the higher turnout. And which means that the opposition mobilizes additional voters better than we do. It's an issue that we should pay attention to. We must, however, not become complacent, and we must pay attention to both our strongholds and see our marginal areas as long-term projects. That point is, sometimes Call will say, please put more resources to the Western Cape because we want to win that province back. There's no effectiveness that works that way. You put a lot of resources where you perform best, because it is the province that where you perform best that pulls your overall performance, and deal with your weak provinces on a project basis. You can allocate special resources for that province, but you can't redirect your resources to your weakest point and kill your strongest point. It's not done. It's not done. You can discuss that, argue with me about it, and I saw many strategies here will explain that better. The task team appointed, the appointed task team investigated these irregularities to the selection of candidates. The team took more than a year to investigate these complaints and compile a very detailed report. The NEC has received that report, comrades. I'm sure Ward 36 in the Western Cape, you will not phone me every day now. That report is there now. You know, Ward 36. Ibuya nila report kankosazana. xa uyidropha kufuna omnye ibuya nini laa report kankosazana njani mani ikhona ngoku. But what has happened, comrade, it came a bit late, very close to the national conference, and the decision was that we are accepting it, we are endorsing it, and we are committing ourselves to implementing all the recommendations of that report. Where it says we must recall a councillor, we will recall a councillor and contest by-elections. Where it says we must redo ANC process on the basis of that, take a decision, we'll redo ANC processes. We're not going to ignore the problems, we're going to confront them. The findings of that report point to a number of issues, whether it is non-compliance or more deliberate manipulation, disregard of guidelines. We will look into those issues, but fortunately, we're handing that responsibility over to the incoming NEC. And therefore, in some instances, comrade, if it says we must discipline comrades, we will. Where it finds criminal activities and therefore must refer cases to police, we will. That is how far committed the NEC has been about that report. So you must expect that in the new year, we'll be coming to the provinces, giving you detailed report, branch by branch, word by word. Take action word by word. That commitment we're making. I'm not going to get into the Centenary report, comrade. What I want to do, because you may easily say, in the Constitution there is no Centenary report. It's part of the Secretary General's report. Yes, man. But I want to delegate. Listen carefully, man. I want to delegate the responsibility of reporting on the Centenary, talk to that report, to conference, as I will delegate the reporting on finances to the Treasurer General in terms of the Constitution, you know. Among the reports, it will be the President Political Report and the Secretary General's Organizational Report, including the financial report. So in other words, TG, when you report here, you are executing delegated powers. Now, once you tamper with the Constitution, he may put together a disciplinary committee immediately to discipline you. Sisbalega, we want to ask you to talk to the Centenary part of the report. Thank you very much.
Amandla! Gawethu! Thank you very much, Comrade Secretary General, both for your presentation of the organizational report and being yourself in the way you put things. In the past 5 years, the one consistent debate or argument with Nobala, between Nobala and me, is about language yakhe. But I must say he did quite well. Okay, comrades, you have the report from the National Centenary Task Team. We will simply draw your attention to certain parts of it. In the first section, comrades, I want to draw your attention to paragraph 1.7 on page 2, which tries to summarize the content of the whole report. It says this report aims to canvass the areas of work of the Centenary Committee in all its manifestations. It deals with the questions of the mandate, the methodology used to execute the conference resolution, the various committees formed, and all other aspects that facilitated the success of the centenary celebrations. It lays the ground for the various consultations that were held, the establishment of the concept document, ensuring that the ANC's own philosophy, including the participation of women and their structures, was carried out as faithfully as possible. Section 2 of the report then takes us to the 52nd National Conference resolution that actually gave the mandate for the centenary celebrations. It was on the basis of that resolution that the National Executive Committee deliberated and decided to form a National Centenary Task Team. The National Centenary Task Team further formed other substructures, and the report lists them and outlines the work that they did. One of the first things that the NEC decided was that a priority task of the NCTT was the putting together of a book on the history of the ANC. The National Centenary Task Team then also formulated the concept document that was submitted to the National General Council. The National General Council adopted the concept document, and that concept document became the guide for the work of the celebrations of the centenary. In section 3, comrades, we point out in 3.2 that the NCTT continuously submitted reports to the National Executive Committee throughout the time of its operation. If we move to the Section 3 then summarizes generally the work of the NCTT and, in our view, what were the successes and the experience, as has also been captured by both the President and the the organizational report of the Secretary General. Under Section 4, on page 6, I wish to draw your attention to some of the veterans that have since left us, who were part of the NCTT and really gave a lot of guidance and contributed tremendously to this work. In 4.4, where we point out that we have since been left by Comrade Chris Dlamini, Henry Squire Makoti, and Mebetha Qowa. If you move over to page 7, you will see a list of the subcommittees that were then formed by the NCTT, and they further elaborated the work of the NCTT and the Centenary celebrations broadly under those themes that are listed there. Just to highlight that the history book is expected to be finished within the first half of next year. And the two comrades who are busy with that work are our veterans, Comrade Mac Maharaj and Comrade Paulo Jordan. We then have two comrades who are writers themselves, who are editors, and that's Comrade Mandlalanga and Comrade Kiurapetsi Khositsile. If you look at the 7th subcommittee in that list, the archives and data collection, which has been convened by Comrade Aziz Bahat, a lot of work has gone under that subcommittee work, including a recent International Archives conference, which was hosted in the Eastern Cape, where, under the auspices of the National Heritage Council, we were able to gather international friends whom we believe can be very helpful in helping the ANC gather material, archival material, whether it be photographs or reports and so on, because the material that the ANC has in the country in Fort Hare is material mainly from our offices in the external mission when we came back. But there are many archives that are all over the world. We were able to convene people from all the countries where there is material that we believe is part of the heritage of the African National Congress. And that needs to be brought back to South Africa. And when we finally have our Heritage Institute as agreed and provided for in the concept document as adopted by the NGC, all this material will be put in that Heritage Institute. It will be the final home of such material, so that it is material that our future will benefit from and future generations can use for research and to guide the way forward as we move into the 2nd century of the ANC. We then, comrades, outline all the work done under each of the subcommittees, and I will not get into that. You will read that. Safe to say that we have on page 11 a point there in the middle of the page about accessibility of the lectures that were delivered by the President and the Deputy President with the last lecture on the 12th President. And these lectures will form one of the volumes of annexures to this report. There are 6 volumes that are annexures to this report. But because of resources and the challenge of paper, we couldn't make for every delegate the package of 6 volumes of annexures. But what we have arranged is that each delegation, in addition to this report, will have the package of 6 volumes of annexures. And then these lectures have also been posted on the ANC website and were also used in ANC Today. On the last subcommittee that I had referred to relating to legacy projects, work that would also be deposited in the Heritage Institute finally. On page 13, we point out that the NEC has formed a project management team which is taking forward the work that is necessary in terms of actually erecting and establishing that Heritage Institute, which will be here where the ANC was born. The incoming NEC must continue with the work under this subcommittee, and hopefully many of the same faces should remain there in spite of leadership change, so that we don't lose out from what we have already invested in the comrades. We then, comrades, look at the work that has been happening in the provinces. And we asked each province to submit its own report. Regrettably, there are 3 provinces that you will see are missing. And we will still pursue those provinces and ensure that even after conference, their reports can still be incorporated into the final text of this report. But each province clearly benefited a lot from the program of the Centenary Flame that went all over South Africa, every region, and also from the lectures, the presidential memorial lectures. We experienced a reconnection and a renewal between the ANC and families of people who fell, families of people who were our veterans that have left us, who had thought maybe we had forgotten them. So the Centenary program was very effective in the area of reconnecting with our people, both in South Africa, in the continent of Africa, and around the globe, as you will also see in other parts, as in section 7, where we deal with the international level of the work that was done under the Centenary. You will have in the volumes of annexures a resolution, for instance, by the AU, which resolved to support the ANC Centenary and associated itself with the ANC, and reminded us that the celebration of our centenary was not only for us as ANC card-carrying members, but was for definitely the whole of Africa, because they still see themselves as part of the ANC. There are still outstanding activities, comrades, that will be pursued in the new year as part of our legacy project work. There were activities already planned in Atlanta, in the US, in the UK, where we were going to gather former anti-apartheid activists to say thank you to the world, and for them also to celebrate the centenary. And those activities are going to be pursued under the new leadership, and so that through this work that we started during this time of the centenary, we would reinstate where perhaps we had lost connection or contacts with friends, or we would strengthen yet again those friendships with people who helped us during our own struggle. Comrades, the last thing I wish to highlight on the international part of the work is on page 30, 753 up to 756, where we report on the third International Solidarity Conference, which, as part of our work of marking the centenary, was convened in the weekend that was also honoring our late President O.R. Tambo. And during that occasion, as the President opened and delivered the presidential memorial lecture on Comrade O.R. Tambo, he also was able to award a number of former anti-apartheid activists and leaders all over the world the Order of the Friends of O.R. Tambo, which is part of the national orders that the President normally awards in April. So there was a special arrangement, and that was done at the opening of that centenary lecture occasion, which was also marking the birthday of our late leader. We had managed, comrades, at that conference to gather progressives from all over the globe. Remember, the first International Solidarity Conference was convened by the ANC in Arusha in 1987. The second one was convened here in South Africa in 1993. This was the third International Solidarity Conference, and this was almost 20 years later. And what the progressives said to us at the end of that conference was that they shouldn't have to wait this long this time, and that these gatherings must definitely continue, and that they believe that this country, led by the ANC, must continue to convene them, because there are many difficulties around the globe that require all progressive-minded people to come together, to talk about them, to share perspectives, and to agree on the way to deal with the situations that we are faced with and the challenges around the globe. And so this is an issue that we believe the commission that will deal with international relations has to process and give guidance on, so that very, very soon, as in fact decided by this International Solidarity Conference, we have to convene a steering committee. And as you see there, this steering committee would be an international one, so that there is a way of ensuring that we sustain the momentum of progressive forces being in touch and not having to rely on the media to know what situations we're each dealing with. Many of our friends were shocked by Marikana and were able to clarify themselves when they attended this conference. And so it's clear that it's also in our own interest that our friends around the globe must know what's happening directly from us, not from the media. Lastly, comrades, we have observations and recommendations, but we need to point out that these are scattered. The recommendations are scattered all over this report. And when we adopt this report as part of what the SG submits before this conference, we need to make sure that those issues can be picked up, processed through the relevant structures of the ANC after this conference. And so, on that note, comrades, we submit this report. May I remind the leaders of delegations to make sure they get the volumes of annexures. There are 6 of them. Comrades, earlier today, a comrade, when we were discussing the program, came through to make certain suggestions, proposals. Now, in dealing with that matter, we would like to read from the Constitution of the ANC, the Rule 11, dealing with duties and powers of the National Conference. 11.2. The National Conference shall receive and discuss the reports of the NEC, which shall include the Presidential Address, the Secretary General's report, which shall include a report on the work and activities of the Veterans League, Women's League, and Youth League, and the Treasurer General's report. This provision does not say conference needs to discuss the reports in plenary, at which point, nor does it even refer to the adoption. However, conference has agreed that these reports will be discussed in commissions, in the commissions on the organizational renewal and the strategy and tactics one, and they will bring reports back, and it is then that plenary will have an opportunity to engage with them. And so that's how we settle that issue. Comrades, we have a number of announcements before we adjourn for dinner. Here are announcements from the Electoral Commission. All nominees who have not signed their acceptance forms must do so at the Election Agency office, and this is a hall called Van der Merwe Scholes Hall. For officials, this must be done tonight. For NEC nominees, it must be done by 1 o'clock on the 17th December 2012, that's tomorrow. So if you've been nominated for an official position, please sign by tonight. If you are nominated for an NEC position, make sure you have signed by 1 o'clock tomorrow. Monitors from the various provinces, comrades, are you listening? Monitors from the various provinces and leagues must join the Electoral Commission after the adoption of the rules at the same venue I referred to earlier. And this Electoral Commission will meet tonight. Now, we are not ready to receive the credentials report. We believe also that because there were difficulties with lunch for some of the delegates, we should break for dinner as soon as possible, and we believe that the delegates that were not happy when they came back will be happier. We believe you'll be happier. Comrades, there's also a request that we request that the KZN delegates should remain when the plenary adjourns, which means just now. That's an announcement from Comrades Sihle Zigalala. Comrades, secretaries of provinces, you are requested to gather behind the stage. Comrades, plenary is adjourned, and when we come back, that session will be a closed one. We will come back at 9:30. Comrades, there's a phone here and Nokia, lost and found keys. There was an exchange of bags at the stairs. There are many announcements which I'm going to make still later. Another key.